Can't promise I'm going to be as dynamic as Stella. Thanks for that. That was really fun. And also thank you, Julius, for the great introduction. And I'm honored to be cooking you pancakes in the future. Today I'm really excited to be here, and I'd be lying if I told you that I wasn't at least a little bit intimidated by the quality of all the speakers and attendees here today. So I'm really excited to be here sharing with you a bit of our journey as a remote company at Olark. And I hope you can take away some things to your teams. Also, I wasn't expecting to be holding a mic, and I grew up in a large Italian family, and I talk with my hands a lot, so I apologize in advance if this gets thrown in this general direction. So watch out. All right, let's see how this thing works. So before we get started, I figured I'd have a little introduction. I actually didn't know I was going to be introduced today, so I'll do this one a little bit faster. So a little bit about me. I've been a builder for a long time. I love to build software. I have an engineering background. But besides being an engineer, I'm definitely a huge extrovert, and my friends have told me that I really have a tendency to gather people and cultivate culture, community around myself, and that maybe I should do more of that in my job. So recently I felt a lot more drawn to building culture at Olark instead of just code as an engineer. So that's me. What about Olark? If you guys aren't familiar, Olark is a live messaging platform for customer service to talk with customers on your websites. So we started in 2009, about as not remote as it can possibly get. There's 4 of us in a 3-bedroom apartment in Mountain View. We lived together, we worked together 24/7, and we pretty much were together at all times. We even ate at our desks because we literally didn't have anywhere else to eat in the house. After our first year, though, my co-founder Zach moved back to Ann Arbor, and our first hire worked from his family farm in Virginia. So we started to become a bit more remote. And living on a farm out in rural Virginia, you know how to live further away from folks. So I think we really lucked out in that our first 2 people was a co-founder and somebody who knew how to live further away. As we grew over the years, we kind of struggled figuring out, do we want to be a remote company or not? We have a San Francisco office, we have an Ann Arbor office. Are we going full remote? Are we just going to have these 2 kind of hubs and maybe a couple remote folks? But it turns out over time, we've grown into, this year, I'm proud to say, that we're a majority remote company. So there are more people who don't work in an office now at Olark than work in both of our offices combined. And that's just about 40 people, like I mentioned earlier. So we've been doing remote work for about 5 years now. And if you're like a lot of other people that I've spoken to, when you hear that most of our employees are remote, and if I were to also tell you that our offices probably have 3 to 5 people in them at any given time, even though we have 8 people in those areas, you might have this kind of reaction. So first, a quick show of hands, how many of you would like to have remote work available at your company? Okay, so a fair amount. But how many of you hesitate because you're concerned about the impact it might have on your culture? Okay, actually a lot of folks, even folks who didn't want remote culture in the first place, or remote work. So our team spans geography, time zones, cultures, personalities, work styles, and all kinds of things. We've definitely faced challenges, and a lot of those challenges are things that lots of companies face. However, out of the 40 folks that we've had on the team, less than a handful have moved on to other things. And despite all these challenges, I think we've really managed to build something special at Olark. And I pulled down these quotes from Glassdoor and from just surveying my teammates last week. And reading these makes me really happy and proud to be a part of the team that we have and the culture that we have in our company. And so it seems like we're doing something right. And this actually, putting together this talk was a good reflection for me to think about what are those things that we're doing right. So I think it is very possible to have both a remote company and a thriving culture, if we're any example. So over the past couple weeks, I've tried to look at what tools and practices did we have that helped us to build this remote team. So again, I'm here to talk about remote culture, not remote work. I think there's tons of stuff out there on how to do remote work, the collaboration tools that are available. There's lots of companies doing remote work. And I don't know what their cultures are like, but I think that they seem to be successfully doing the work part of it and the collaboration part of it. But what about the culture part of it? I want to talk about the human elements and how some of those tools can factor in to your company culture as well. So today I'm going to talk about 4 practices that I believe helped shape our culture at Olark. And helped us thrive. We definitely didn't start out doing these, by the way. They've come from, I think, years of experimentation and kind of ups and downs and figuring out how to do it right. And so these 4 things are getting in the same boat, reinforcing culture explicitly at every opportunity, encouraging co-ownership, so not just kind of top-down, and also prioritizing human connection. So let's start with getting in the same boat. So this is what a typical office setup might be, where you're trying to tack on remote to it. You have folks in an office. There are all kinds of conversations and implicit process that happens inside that office, and your remote person out here is not a part of that. They are not able to physically interact with the folks in what I'll call the co-location boat. So they're not in that boat with other folks. And what you may not realize, and what we didn't realize early on, is how isolating this can be for somebody working remotely. I mean, it seems obvious maybe when you make a diagram, but you're not thinking about that, I think, initially. So you're constantly out of the loop with what's happening in the office, and your teammates can easily forget about you, and they can forget about your needs, and you become the exception rather than the rule. So this is a little bit more what structure looks like at Olark. We've evolved over time to getting everyone in what I'll call the remote boat. So there's no longer, there are offices, right? So like I said, we have a San Francisco office and an Ann Arbor office, but that's not primarily where the culture is happening. The culture is happening in the actual office, the thing that people log into every day, which is Google Docs, Gmail, HipChat, GitHub, Trello, all of the tools that we use on a day-to-day basis to get our work done. So these are our collaboration tools, but they do more for us than just help us to collaborate. If you don't put your culture in, or try to build your culture in this area, then getting things done and building that culture looks differently for your local teammates than for your remote teammates, and you start to splinter your culture, I believe. So here's some examples of how we use these tools to help build that culture in the remote boat. So first of all of our meeting agendas and our minutes and our brainstorming and even some fun things. I think we had like Olark, we have an Olark pivot ideas document that includes brick and mortar stores and some restaurants that we could open one day. Just like fun stuff like that shows up in Google Docs. And it's something that everybody can participate in. When we're doing our meetings, everybody has the Google Doc open. And this goes even for folks that are local and face-to-face with no remote folks participating. So if I'm sitting in a room with somebody and we're having a meeting, we're still doing all of our minutes in Google Docs because that allows all of the remote people to hop in, read it afterwards, but even during they can kind of see like what's going on and maybe see if they want to hop in on a brainstorming or something along those lines, join a little bit late. Where you'd be able to do that in a local office, you'd see people going to a conference room. You don't have that in a remote context. So again, like when we're using this for everything we do, it makes it more of it makes Google Docs the rule instead of the exception. So you're not doing these exceptional cases for remote folks. You're always treating it like it's first class. We do the same thing, by the way, inside of HipChat, which is our group chat. I know that's not the cool hotness of Slack, but we'll get there maybe eventually. So even this one maybe sounds even weirder to you. If you're sitting in the same office as somebody, why are you going to message them on HipChat? In the group context in particular, so if you're in a group chat room, in a physical co-location, people know that, oh, hey, these two people just kind of started this ad hoc conversation and this brainstorming, and I might want to join in on that. So it's very helpful to have a group chat room where people can see that happening so that remote folks can do exactly that. They can jump in on those conversations. I would go even further to say that having even one-on-one conversations where you're doing a private message with folks is still helpful to do even if you're in the same office, because it helps you build the skill of chatting with somebody one-on-one. So you're not treating, again, folks that are local to you differently than you're treating folks that are remote from you. So you kind of build up that skill of using the tool. And maybe you feel like this is kind of like a weird and sterile way to talk to people because you're not actually, you feel like you maybe are not personally interacting. But I actually had a coworker last week tell me that GIFs help her bring her whole self to work. We, we will throw fun photos and animated GIFs and memes into Olarkville, which is our main chat room, and kind of like the water cooler of the company. And I think a lot of fun stuff happens in there, and so it's not nearly as sterile as you would probably think coming from a normal office. In fact, I think we actually have a lot more fun than the average company. So besides these two, like these off-the-shelf tools that we have, not everything is available to you. And if you have an engineering team, you shouldn't be afraid to use their skills to build, to invest in smaller tools that help your specific context and your specific team, and treat your culture as something that's first class. So like for example, one of our tools that we built was, well, we wanted to solve this idea of recognition. And probably most of you, if you have a chat room, you might have a chat bot, and you might do this exact same kind of functionality. But our chat bot is named Olarkami. He's very helpful and friendly, and he helps us do things like what the equivalent of a virtual high five. So if you want to recognize somebody and they helped you out, you can just add ++ after their username, and it keeps track of their karma. And it's kind of a fun way for folks to recognize each other. Again, doing this in the context that helps remote folks feel just as included and just as recognized as other folks. Olarkami does a lot of other things, but I didn't want to put like a ton of slides. I want to give you some question time too. Another challenge that we face is understanding when people are free or busy or even blocked on tasks that they're trying to do. Again, when you're in a co-located situation, you can see when somebody is frustrated or maybe inundated with work, or you can tell if you can go and ask somebody a question. But we don't have an easy way of doing that when we're remote. We don't see that. So what we did is we built this tool called Pancake. That's a long story why it's called that, partially because I like pancakes, I suppose. That it sits on top of Google Calendar and Trello, and kind of gives you a sense whether people are available, whether they're out of the office, whether they're busy with meetings, whether they're doing a bunch of other work. So you can get a sense of if you can reach out, and also if it would be helpful for you to reach out. You can see whoever this was here was blocked on a couple tasks, and maybe those are things that I can help them out with. So one part of getting in the same boat that's a little bit harder to do is when you're talking about time zones. So for our company, we've gotten around this a little bit by having most of our folks in a range of 4 hours of time zones. We do have a few people in Europe as well, and those folks time shift slightly so that they can overlap with our team. So this is definitely a challenge, and I could see this being much more difficult if we had to span further than the time zones that we do. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. So yes, getting in the same boat, I think, is really crucial for everybody to feel included. And we found that this helps us to, by getting in the same boat, even when we're co-located, helps us to emphasize and practice behaviors that work for the whole team, not just folks who are local. All right, so that is getting in the same boat. Next thing I want to talk about is reinforcing culture explicitly. Again, this is not just reinforcing culture, just reinforcing it explicitly. Being remote, I think, forced us to think way more intentionally about our culture. You can't just write down your mission and slap it on the wall. I know that other people have mentioned that as well. Like, you can't just put that up on the wall and say, like, hey, people are going to know about this. People are going to be reminded of what our mission is, what our core values are. You can't do that and be done in a company where you don't truly have an office that everybody is in. So one example of something that we've done to meet this challenge is putting up our mission inside of Trello. So for each arm of our mission, so we have 3 components to our mission. Each arm of our mission has a dedicated Trello board where we have our major projects tracked, so you can kind of follow what's going on with each element of that mission. So at all times, we're reminded why we're doing these things. Why are we doing this project? Why are we doing that project? So that way you don't end up just doing the work and not knowing what purpose you're serving. Another thing is our core values. So if you'll notice, we have hashtags on all our core values, and I saw that Reflective has that built into their app, which is super awesome, and now I think we should probably use Reflective because of that. But these hashtags are very intentional for us. When you're doing most of your communication over text, you need some way to be able to easily refer back to elements of your culture, and a big element of our culture is these core values, and we use this all the time in chat. We also use it in other places. For example, we explicitly refer back to these core values when we do kudos. So this is the very first section of our team, our weekly team meetings. People can give kudos and thank yous for things that happened in the previous week. You'll notice the pluses in there too. We do that everywhere. And people hashtag it with the value so that we can not only have a reminder of what our values are, but examples of what it means to live out that value on our team. Another value that we try to explicitly encourage is remembering to chill out. This is an aspect of our culture that we don't want folks to burn out. We want everybody to remember that work is not the be-all, end-all of everything. So we actually have basically a vacation diary, a shared vacation diary, that when folks go on a week-long vacation, they post in there, put a few notes about their vacation, and it reminds the rest of us that it's really important to live out that value of chilling out. Another major component of our culture is assuming good faith. And we've tried to do this in besides just implicitly having that behavior, having an explicit reminder in a public space that after every project, we do a reflection, again, in Google Docs, something that everybody can see. It's very explicit and remote friendly so that people know that this is something we care about. And I'll skip a couple slides here because I think we're getting a little bit lower on time. So that's reinforcing culture, and I'm sure there's lots of ways that we can do that more. The next challenge I want to talk about is engaging local and remote teammates in that remote boat. So co-ownership is, I think, a big way that we've accomplished this at Olark, and it's become very deeply rooted in practice at Olark. Very rarely will you see culture on our team handed down from the top. Like, we don't just get the founders together and sit down and we're like, okay, here's the stone tablets, here's the 10 commandments for y'all. Like, it comes out from our team, and even those core values that you saw, we collaboratively built those early on in the company. And we continue to co-own those cultural values. Even at our last retreat, we made some changes to it when we had still 20-some people still collaborating and figuring that out. So trusting teammates to pick up something and run with it helps us to meet cultural needs explicitly and with passion. And it really helps when those folks are the remote teammates because they bring their perspective as a remote teammate on ways that we can enhance our culture. And that helps everybody, not just them. So some examples of this are the Olark Gnomes. So this was actually started by Jeff, who is one of our DevOps engineers. So he's not in HR, not associated in any capacity that you normally maybe associate with culture. But he created this idea of sending gifts to Olarkers on their Olarkiversary, which is their work anniversary, as you might imagine. And so he grew it from just himself kind of coordinating and trying to think of thoughtful gifts to send folks, to now there's 7 gnomes across all the departments of Olark and across many different geographies. And we ship worldwide now as gnomes. And people get some really great, thoughtful stuff, from custom apparel to tiny unicorn terrariums and other things. Another cool tool that we've built is the name game. And this was created by a teammate who came in. And the first thing that she did was recognize that it's hard to meet folks when you don't see them face to face. It's hard to really build up that understanding of who are your teammates and where are they and what do they do. And so we have this simple Google Slides presentation where everybody has their own slide with a profile photo, what they do, their favorite core value, and like fun facts about them. Mine includes things like karaoke and pancakes. And this is something that the whole team now has kind of owned, right? They own their profile on here. They go and they update it and add things, and new folks are able to use this to basically meet their teammates who are remote. So again, actually one of my teammates, he went in and added an animated GIF, so he's winning whatever game didn't exist in the first place. So something we have fun and we all kind of feel a little bit of ownership over. Besides these kind of fun elements of co-ownership, it's really crucial to have everyone feel ownership over helping each other. An attitude of helping and teaching teammates is really important when you can't see folks. You don't know when folks are struggling. You don't know when folks don't understand how to make the next step. So you can't just have this be the sole responsibility of your documentation and your onboarding and your training. These are all great things to have, but in a remote team, newbies don't have somebody to tap on the shoulder. You need to make sure that they feel like there's no such thing as a dumb question. Because you don't know when somebody's struggling, you need to make a safe space for them to come to you asking for that help, and that they know that they're not going to be chastised for that, and they know that you are going to make the time for them to help. So again, this is not a tool, this is just a practice, I think, that's really important for remote work, is a very strong attitude of helping. Okay, so that's co-ownership. The next challenge is, how do we build personal connections between teammates? Because this is still very important. You know, you don't see these folks for the majority of the year. And you sometimes need more than just text to understand where people are coming from and get to know them a bit better. How do you get to the last kind of 20%? Like, you might get 80% of the way with all these other tools and practices, but what about that last 20% of real human connection? So besides the obvious of video conferencing, which, by the way, like, doesn't always work, and it's sort of a poor substitute, you're trying to like meet needs in ways that like mimic reality, mimic in-person reality, but are not actually that. Yes, it helps to an extent, but anyway, these technologies are going to fail on you, so make sure you have like 10 of them to fall back to. Also, since you don't see people every day, notice that's a theme in this, you don't see folks every day, so scheduling time with folks is really important. Having regular check-ins, and I'm not just talking about a check-in like a status update, I'm talking about a check-in that says, how are you doing? And having it on your calendar to remind yourself to go back in, because again, you don't see these people, there's not a trigger that reminds you to go talk to so-and-so. Another major component I think that's been helpful for us is one of our core values is practice empathy. And we've tried to take as many opportunities as we can to do this. And this was sort of a random thing that we realized. Like, we would send emails to the whole team, like, hey, I'm going to be out of the office, I'm sick, or I'm taking a day for self-care, or there was a family emergency. And these, instead of becoming just a status update, like, hey, I'm not going to be around today, it became an opportunity for folks to reach out and express condolences, express support, and practice empathy, and make people feel really cared for. It's really been awesome, even in the last couple of weeks, to see these family emergencies turn into an outpouring of support from teammates. And I think that this value of practicing empathy and these kind of opportunities have helped us connect far beyond the work that we do. And this is not video conferencing. This is something that's real connection that people really feel strongly about. So one last thing about human connection is, just because you have a remote team doesn't mean that you can't get together to hang out at times. Like, we still believe that meeting people in person, like for real, is the best way to make a deeper connection. It's just not something that we're doing every day. But not only do we prioritize it, I think it's very important to consider budgeting for it. You don't just say, like, hey, it's important for you to go see your teammates. Say, like, we will pay for you to go co-work in the same city as them. Go to their city and, you know, check out New Orleans, have fun with that. Like, you know, you don't even have to go and have a project necessarily. You could just be going to get connected with them. And we do this by also attending conferences as groups. And another major thing that we do is every year we have an annual retreat. And this helps us include not just our teammates and have everybody meet each other in one place, but we allow people to bring their significant others and their families. And this is really something that you, in a co-location kind of environment, you might meet somebody's, you know, spouse or fiance or whatever. You might meet their kids at some random events. But again, you're not going to have that when most folks are remote from you. And so this is our biggest opportunity of the year to deepen real relationships with our coworkers as people and not just as teammates. So I think that's been a really important part of our culture. So that's all I have for you today. To review, it's really important to get in the remote boat together, to take every opportunity that you can to reinforce your culture explicitly, to co-own as much of your culture as possible and to really encourage people and support them when they try to improve your culture. And remember that you can still meet in person and schedule time to be with folks and have a real human connection. And I think that these 4 practices have really helped us immensely. And I hope that you can take them back to your company, and maybe you can help us build more remote-friendly workplaces. So thank you. I don't know if we have time for questions or not, but 30 seconds for questions. Make it fast.
Hi, thanks for that talk.
Sure.
What would your recommendation be for teams that are onboarding remote team members? So a lot of our onboarding at our company is with shadowing, working with your peers, really listening to them, interact with their clients or whoever they work with in the office. What would be your recommendation for replacing that in remote situations?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We actually use a couple different ways of onboarding folks. If it's easy for them to come and travel to one of our home offices, like I said, in San Francisco and Ann Arbor, we'll actually bring them out for their first week so that they get a chance to at least meet some cluster of other Olarkers. That's not always possible, though. Like, we hired a few folks in Europe, and it wasn't really easy for them to take a whole week to come out, and with the jet lag and everything that you'd be recovering from, it wouldn't be a great experience. One of our teammates, when we hired him, he had a baby, and so you're not going to leave your baby for a week to onboard on the team. So we have done remote onboarding as well. And a lot of it is, we actually use Trello for this, first of all. So we have a bunch of tasks that are onboarding related, and we get as many Olarkers involved as possible. And so if you're shadowing somebody, you'll just get on Skype and you'll screen share, and you'll walk them through what you're doing. You can connect with multiple members of the team that way as well, because each member will sign up for a particular task in that onboarding. So you'll meet folks, and you'll be shadowing them. And again, using the tools that I mentioned, you'll be using those tools day to day, so onboarding with those tools is kind of a natural way, because onboarding in person, you're actually not even completely using the remote tools that you'll be using on a normal basis anyway. Does that make sense? Okay, great. I guess that's it then. If you have other questions, you can find me outside, or you can find me on Twitters, and email me, whatever you want to do. All right, thanks.